create, multiply, and finally preserve. A mindset that is completely different. It requires a new philosophy and a new operating system, because how you think about creating wealth and then how you think about multiplying that wealth and then preserving it requires different frameworks. And what's important to me is to be able to sit down with successful entrepreneurs, people that have accomplished great things like Brian, and be in a situation whereby we talk about how do you keep it. So Brian, now almost entering the 80s kind of bracket of your life, 5,000 square foot overlooking beautiful golf course, from zero to hero, from peasant to living extremely well, you were able to keep it. You were able to preserve the wealth that you created and that you multiplied. I want to talk a little bit about this mental framework and how we preserve what we've created. I think you know as well as I do, especially when we come from backgrounds where, you know, you're not raised in a wealthy family and in a mindset of how to keep money,
right?
The relationship with money that is fine-tuned. A lot of entrepreneurs lose the money that they've made and they end up going to square one on a financial sense. Can we talk a little bit about what it looks like to preserve wealth inside of your business and inside of your personal career?
Well, thank you. I spent most of my life worrying about making money rather than preserving it. And then as you get to a certain age, you realize that you're not going to be able to work full blast forever. And I had only one goal. I read some terrible stories about women whose husbands had died, and within 2 years they were penniless and having to live in a basement of one of their children or someone else. And they've been very successful throughout their lifetimes, but their husbands hadn't really thought very much about what happened if they had died of a heart attack early. And so I set a goal. My goal was that my wife would be financially taken care of for as long as she lives. She's 9 years younger than me, so the odds are that I will pass first. And so my goal was to make sure that no matter what happened, she would never have to worry about money again. And that's what I focused on, and I achieved it. The other thing is this, is that as you're going along and you're making money and you have excess, and this is really the key. Peter Drucker says that profits are the cost of the future. Where there are no profits, there is no future. So in a business, the profits that you make are the cost of whatever future you want for yourself, your spouse, your children, and so on. And so you have to, first of all, generate enough so that you cover all of your expenses and responsibilities, and you have more put aside. And that's what I did. And because of the law of attraction, if you have money put aside, you will attract into your life opportunities to invest that money. I had two opportunities, major opportunities. They both cost a lot of money. And one was my own fault. I did not look into the background of the business associate well enough. And so I lost a lot of money. But there's a big difference in losses between what are called relative losses and absolute losses. A relative loss is something you can recover from because you have continuing cash flow and so on. An absolute loss, and I have friends who've had this, is once you've lost it, you can never get it back again. And it affects your whole life. So fortunately, I've had what we might call learning experiences. Yeah. But the best experiences is I have invested with really good people. And both in California, both in Florida, and in other places. And these people have put their own money on the same line as mine. And they're very astute. And so with almost by accident, I ended up with a substantial amount of money in income-producing real estate property, which is the very best that you can possibly have. Stock market accounts can change from day to day, but if you have a really good piece of income-producing property, preferably apartments, then that's a really good investment, and it gives you a steady cash flow You have tax benefits from it, and it goes up in value progressively over time. So that's what I've done, and it's worked out. The other thing is low debt. It's no debt is the best of all. And so what I've worked on is having virtually no debt. Aside from a little mortgage debt on my house, I don't owe anybody any money. And that's really important as you become more mature, if you like. We say mature rather than senior.
You're still young.
As you become more mature, is you want to make sure that you don't have any looming expense over your head. And so that's what I managed to do, and that's what people need to do. And going back to what we talked in earlier sessions, is you need to have goals, and you need to write the goals down. And what I just told you is my goals, is to invest carefully with people who know what they're doing, and entrust my money to them. And that has been the very best thing of all. The second is to get a financial advisor. And it's important because many people think, well, I run my own business or I'm personally successful and so on. I don't need an advisor. Yes, you do. A good financial advisor doesn't cost very much, but they spend 50, 60 hours a week studying investments of all kinds. And they make sure that wherever you are in life is that your investments are spread out in such a way that you are safe, that you don't have to worry about running out. And so I got advised to a financial counselor a few years ago, and we spoke to him actually yesterday on Zoom, and it was a great decision. So therefore, any excess money that I have we just put it aside and put it into the accounts that are managed by an expert. And on a regular basis, the expert fills us in, informs us what's going on and how it's going. But the money increases in value. It's been steady increase. We don't speculate, don't buy anything that...
You don't buy Bitcoin? I'm going to buy you some Bitcoin, Brian.
Thank you so much. But with regard to money, I just I told you I wrote a book, and in that there's a whole lot of different laws of money. One of them is that the only thing easy about money is losing it. There's no such thing as easy money. And one of my favorite quotes is that when a man with money meets a man with experience, the man with experience is going to end up with the money, and the man with the money is going to end up with the experience. So if you are going to become financially independent, and that's very, very important, is that you set a goal to be financially independent, and that you sacrifice in the short term by putting money aside, by putting off vacations and things like that, to build your account to the point where no matter what happens, you're locked in, you're safe, you're okay. The great problem with the 80% or more of people is that they don't think about preserving their estate during their working lifetime, and suddenly they're 65 or 70, and the average American, according to my research, has a net worth of about $31,000 plus Social Security and Medicare. In other words, they don't have anything put aside. And ideally, their house is paid off. But if it's not, then they have to rent or live with their kids. And that was not necessary because the average American working person earns a lot of money in the course of their lifetime, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. And what they need to do, as I say, is you need to put aside 10% of what you're earning and never touch it. Maybe 15%, maybe 20%. But the famous book, The Richest Man in Babylon, where he interviews this man who started with nothing and became rich, his recommendation is pay yourself first, is take 10% off of every paycheck before you start spending it on other things, and just put it away. And imagine it's sort of like one of those Chinese traps where money goes in and never comes out. And the money only goes one direction. And the only thing you do with that money is you invest it very carefully in something else that also earns money. And another thing is it's very important that you have good advisors. In the stock market, for example, and I have portfolios in the stock market, they're very conservative. I say that the average stock market expert spends about 50 hours a week, maybe 60 hours a week, studying the market and making a decision. And every time you buy a stock, or anybody buys one for you, it is them betting against someone else who's selling the stock. And the person who's selling the stock believes that it's going to go down, and the person buying it believes it's going to go up. And one of them has to be right. And so every time you make an investment in the stock market, you're rolling the dice. You're gambling, you're betting against people who do this 50, 60 hours a week. So you just have to be cautious. You have to get advice from very good people. And that's why wealthy people, and I don't consider myself wealthy, but wealthy people are very fastidious about choosing financial advisors. And almost every wealthy family has sort of like a financial office with one or two or three people who just work full-time managing their money. And they have one rule. It's interesting. One of the self-made billionaires in Forbes magazine was asked, what is the key to your financial success? And he said, rule number one, he said, don't lose money. He said, rule number two is whenever you're tempted, go back to rule number one, don't lose money. He said, if all you do throughout your working lifetime is save a certain amount, we say 10% or more, and don't lose it, that alone, with the miracle of compound interest, will assure that you are wealthy by the time you settle down. Well, one of the richest men in America, Warren Buffett, says the same thing. It's the power of compounding. It's putting the money into very solid stocks, solid companies that are producing good products, that are very popular, and that are growing steadily over time, and just leave it there. And that's enabled him to have one of the highest returns in the history of man on earth. Just basically putting the money in, leaving it there, and having it carefully managed. So if you want to preserve your wealth, start thinking about it now. An interesting thing about wealth preservation is that when you create a wealth preservation account, you set up a force field of energy that starts to attract into your life people and opportunities to grow your money. If you don't have any money, then you don't attract anything.
Yes.
Barbara and I started a business many years ago, and just like most first-time entrepreneurs in a new business, we lost most of our money. I say when we started our business, we learned how to sell again. I sold my house, I sold my car, I sold my furniture, I sold everything. And however, when we sold the house, Barbara, without my knowing it, took $10,000 and put it into a separate bank account where I didn't know about it and I couldn't touch it, and just left it there. And we never had another debt problem again for the rest of our lives. There's something about having that chunk of money put aside, created business opportunities, enabled us to make more money than we were spending and so on. And she didn't tell me for a long time, but that chunk of money put aside that you never touch, and this is not fun money, vacation money, boat money, and so on. You just never touch it. And then if you want to, you can have the bank invested in careful, conservative funds of various kinds. But it's quite interesting because I've met many other people who've done the same thing. They've taken a chunk of money and put it aside, and this is, we used to call it FU money. You have the money.
We still call it that. We still call it that.
And however, the most amazing thing was that because that money was there, it created this force field of energy, which I really believe in, that we never had another financial problem. And if we did, we earned our way out of it. We made the money, we loaned, we hypothecated, and so on. It never had a problem once you have a chunk. Then you start adding to the chunk. And as the chunk gets bigger, you start to attract more and more money. You earn more in your day job, but you also attract opportunities. And that doesn't mean that you can just take the opportunities without thinking about it, but it means that you have more opportunities than you could imagine. When you start off, you don't have any opportunities. You don't have any money, you don't have any opportunities. But as you start to make money, you start to attract people with opportunities. You start to meet really good people. And you meet people who introduce you to people, and you get into small investments, or you take a piece of something, and then that grows, and then it's leveraged into something else, and so on. But you have to start. You have to start saving, and the critical word in financial independence is sacrifice. You have to be willing to make sacrifices in the short term in order to enjoy complete security in the long term. But you start off with your goal book, and you write down your goals. What are my financial goals in life? And just go wild with this. As you travel around the world on a cruise ship. I earn enough money to do this. I have a condominium. I take vacations. I put my kids through college. Everything that you could imagine doing if you had a lot of money. And my promise to you is that you'll start to attract more opportunities to have more money. It's the most amazing darn thing.
I think intentionality is extremely important.
Yes.
You're in a situation where I ask a lot of people, I'm like, hey, how much money do you make a month? Oh, 5 to 10K. What do you mean 5 to 10K? Do you make 5? Do you make 7? Do you make 9? Do you make 10? It's like, oh, well, ballpark. And I began to realize people have no financial goals, and they have no financial planning because they have no financial literacy. Can you talk to me about because you didn't just conceptualize this process of preserving wealth, you had to learn into it.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about financial literacy, Brian.
Well, it's interesting. We say you become what you think about most of the time. That's one of the great laws of life. You become what you think about. So the question is, what do you think about most of the time? And you'll find that people who are financially literate spend an average of 10 hours a month reading about money. They read financial books, they read financial stories, they read financial magazines, they read the financial pages in the newspaper. People who have financial problems spend an average of 1 hour a week looking at their bills, mostly their bills, and thinking about their finances, and arguing with their spouse over who spent this and who spent that. So if you are spending 10 hours a week, just a little bit each day, for example, one of the magazines you should be reading, or newspapers, is Wall Street Journal. Everybody should read the Wall Street Journal, or if you're in Canada, you should read the Globe and Mail, because these have all kinds of stories about money and about people who are doing things with money and learning and experiences and reverses and so on. And what happens is you start to think like they do. You start to become much more cognizant and knowledgeable. And you look at people who've made mistakes and you say, by gum, I don't want to do that. I'm going to be sure not to do that. And then you don't. You program into your mind a modicum of caution because you're knowledgeable about what's going on in the financial world. And the great majority, 80% or more, God bless them, don't read a thing beyond the sports and the funny and the comic pages. So it's really important that you educate yourself. And so when I decided to be a millionaire, and there was a real revelation in my early 20s that it would be possible that I could, if I started selling, went from selling knickknacks door to door, I went to selling mutual funds. And in mutual funds, you have to do a lot of study about finance and money and investments and monthly programs and things like that. And that's when you start to think, hey, I could be financially successful. I could be a millionaire. And that became my goal. When you make a decision to become a millionaire, you see the whole world differently. And the world sees you differently. And you change your attitude toward earning, you earn more, and conserving, you conserve more. It's a most wonderful thing. But you make a decision, and everybody should make that decision. I am going to be a millionaire. But don't think that you're going to do it overnight like the get-rich-quick people. It's going to take you 10 to 20 years. And as we said earlier, the first million is the hardest because you have to become a totally new person. You have to become a millionaire at the cell level in order to achieve it at the financial level. But once you have achieved it, then if you lose it, it's fairly easy to earn it back again because now you know how. You know what to do and what not to do. And so it's much faster. But your goal is to set it as a goal and write it down and make a plan to achieve it. And then the next part is saving, is you've got to put money away all the time. You've got to put hurting money away. A dollar a day is not going to help. What you have to do is say, I'm going to put 10% of everything that I earn, I'm going to put into a bank account and my financial accumulation account. And this money goes in and never comes out. And then hold your feet to the fire and do it. Do what you say you will do. And every time that you sacrifice and push yourself and discipline yourself to do what you know is the right thing to do, you become stronger and better and smarter. And surprise, surprise, you get good results and better results. So when I started off, I had nothing. And as my friend Jim Rohn said, it used to be that when you got to nothing, you stopped. Now you just go right, shooting right on past it. And so you can lose a lot and get into a lot of debt. But then I made a decision to be a millionaire. And that changes your whole attitude. What would a millionaire do in a situation like this? How would a millionaire invest? How would a millionaire work? How would a millionaire use their time? And then you read about millionaires. And I have read so much, and I've written so much about millionaires, is the more you read about them, the more you think yourself as one. I can do that. I can do that. But that's not unusual. And you start to see yourself as a millionaire. Now, how do millionaires behave? What would millionaires do in a situation like this?
And I believe that if you begin to actually dive into the story,
yes,
you realize that it's not that impossible. Now, when I speak about this, I'm not talking about the child that's in Liberia that has to walk 20 miles a day in order to fetch clean water. I'm talking about this Western world that we live in, this ability to truly preserve your purchasing power throughout time is possible. I think also, especially for younger people, it's the idea of something that you mentioned. You didn't say no more money coming in preservation. You said cash flow. Talk to me about the importance of, in this preservation model, having this cash flow as opposed to just this big bankroll that's just sitting there and you're chipping away at it slowly but surely.
Well, everybody who has half a brain in the world of money thinks about cash flow all the time. And sometimes when interest rates change by 0.5% or 0.1%, it'll cause an enormous amount of money to move to a higher cash flow. So everybody who is successful financially thinks about cash flow all the time. Today, we have an interesting situation where interest rates were 3% a few years ago, and now they're 7-8%. That's an extraordinary change, and a lot of people's homes have dropped in value by maybe 20%. If that was their primary asset, because of raising interest rates, the value of your property goes down. So one of the very best things to do, and many people are investing in property management companies who have a portfolio of rental properties, especially apartments, and by investing in these are virtually always full. People always need them. If you invest in something that's moderately priced in terms of rental rates, these will always be full. And good management makes sure that the rental rates are reasonable so that they have a steady, predictable cash flow. One of Warren Buffett's great statements is that in the stock market, he said, bears make money and
bulls make money.
Bulls make money, but pigs go broke. It's people who are trying to make a lot of money quick, get rich quick. There is no such thing as get rich quick. Every so often somebody does it, but it is so rare and so unpredictable that you should never be looking for ways to make up for 20 years of not investing. What you do is you start at saving as much as you possibly can and put it into the hands of smart investors who have their own money on the line. And that's what most rich people do. Or they will set up, as we said before, at their own office with full-time professionals who just run their money. And as a result, the rule, don't lose money. They don't lose money. And if all you do is don't lose money and depend on compound interest, you will retire rich. You'll become a millionaire or a multimillionaire. So make it a decision from the beginning. Write it down as a goal. I am a millionaire by such and such a date. And give yourself a reasonable date based on where you are today. And just repeat that over and over again. And you will attract into your life the opportunities to earn more income and the opportunities to invest that income and have a high cash flow and become wealthy.
Do you make a plan based on the goal, or do you make the goal based on the plan? And this is what I mean by it. I want to be a millionaire by 2030 is the goal.
So it's I am a millionaire.
I am a millionaire in 2030.
Right.
I'm a millionaire in 2030.
Or by 2030, because that covers all the time.
The spectrum.
Between where you are and 2030.
So
it may be earlier.
Where in this mental framework does somebody, for example, create an elusive goal that then gets crushed because of their expectations? And how do you adjust that based on the plan to make sure that you're not shooting too short, but simultaneously you're not looking at something saying, I'm going to do this, and then you feel some sort of retribution internally because that date came and, well, you failed it?
When I was a young man, I went off to sea. I got a job on a Norwegian freighter out of Halifax to work my way across the Atlantic to England. And every so often, it was about a 6-week journey, every so often they would ask me to come up onto the steering wheel and run the steering wheel and just keep the steering wheel of this huge ship on track so that it didn't deviate. That didn't require much intelligence, and they'd send somebody by every so often to make sure that I wasn't deviating. And they would also have what do we call this? Not a Geiger counter, but a sextant. And with a sextant, before they had radio and electronics and everything else, with a sextant you could actually shoot at the moon or the sun or the stars or all three simultaneously, and it would locate you right on the world surface. You could tell right to the spot
where you were.
They would take it and make a mark on the map. And I know because I would sit there and watch that. And I always was so admiring of the sextant, is that it could tell you where you were in the world. Well, that's the same thing as a financial plan. It tells you where you are in the financial world. And as you put money in it, and as you calculate it and add it up and give some time every month, like about 10 hours, on a regular basis, inhale, exhale, read, study, financial success, people who started with nothing, and what they do with their money. And that's why it's so important that you read at least one financial newspaper that tells you, because this is aimed at people with money. So therefore, they're talking to you. You may not have it now, but the more you immerse yourself in what people who have money think about and learn about and practice all the time, the more information you have, the better decisions you make, the more you save, the more confidence you have that this is basically taking you toward financial independence. And there's a law which I came across, and it's in my book. It's called the law of accelerating acceleration. And it says that when you start off here to achieve your goal here, is you move very slowly toward the goal initially. And the goal actually starts to move very slowly toward you. But as time passes, the both of you speed up and they accelerate. And the goal starts to move toward you faster, and you start to move toward it faster. And most of your biggest goals are accomplished in the last 20% of time that you work on the goals. So you often don't see any major changes for a long time, but then they start to happen very rapidly. The acceleration starts to accelerate. And you just have to believe that this is true, because it is true, and adjust your financial life accordingly. And so by constantly saving and being patient, all successful money is patient money. They don't run around with the money. They don't throw it around. They just sit it out. They're patient. And surprise, surprise, good things come to those who wait. You know, you've heard that.
Yes.
But only things that are left over from those who hustle. But nonetheless, it's a good principle, is that be clear about your goal and then keep putting money into the side that you can control. Like my wife's bank account, where she put in $10,000, and that money sat there like a force field of energy, attracting more money and more opportunities and more sales and more profits. And so it just sat there sort of vibrating with energy. And we never, in our married life, never ran out of money again, as long as you had that chunk of money emanating this energy.
I think it's interesting because a lot of entrepreneurs, they'll make their first couple bucks, they're doing well, and the first thing that they'll do is they'll go out and spend it, because they don't realize that that's not spending money, that's freedom money. That what you're doing right now is, when you go out, let's say to the designer store or to the car dealership, you're not buying that item with money. You are buying that item with the amount of time that it took you to get the money that would therefore acquire the item. Therefore, the gauge that you put towards materialistic things is in direct proportion to the amount of time invested into the acquisition of that asset or that item. And the objective, in my opinion, is to live beyond materialism, not to live without materialism. And to live beyond materialism is to live with things materially that don't cost you a whole lot of time, energy, and attention through this model of cash flow.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because it's very true. And I call it return on life. How much of your life are you willing to invest in a gadget or a boat? I have a bank account with Wells Fargo down the street here, which I opened when we moved here many years ago. And I sat down with the bank manager, a man named Alan. I still remember him. Very nice guy. And he was telling me, he said that in the banking industry, they can always tell when a person's an entrepreneur, business owner, is about to get into financial trouble, is they decide that they are doing so well that now they can buy an expensive house on the hill or a vacation home or a big boat or something else that requires hundreds of thousands of dollars and loans and mortgages and everything else. And they do that, and then the economy fluctuates and their business gets into trouble and their cash flow is cut off, and they don't have money to service their debt or service the debt that they owe the bank. And very often they just go bust. Whereas if they had just waited another 2 or 3 years until their business was solidly profitable and they had money in the bank, then they could have done those things and never had a problem. He said, but in the banking industry, they watch for the successful business person, like you just said, successful business person or entrepreneur who thinks, well, I'm doing so well now, I can roll the dice and buy something expensive and so on. No. It's too soon. It's just too soon. So we said before, long-term money is patient money. Successful money is patient money. People have the discipline to hold back and keep saving. And at a certain point, you get almost like you cross a line. You have enough money that you can do anything you want with your money.
And what's interesting is, I think my philosophy on purchasing things has developed in the last couple months, and I wanted to share it with you. I was thinking, I was like, I wanted something. I forget what it was. I wanted it. And I sat there and I'm like, why do I want this? Like, why do I want it? And I came down to the conclusion that the only reason I wanted it is because somebody conditioned me to want it. And I realized that most of the things that I wanted materialistically, or a house, whatever it may be, cars, insane travels, everything that you see on Instagram, right? I was like, is this something that I want, or is this something that I've been conditioned to want? And then I began to realize that it had nothing to do with the goals that I had set for myself ahead of time,
right?
Which is the importance of the goal setting, not only to help you accomplish your goals, but to help you stay away from what I like to call the energy vampires. That's causing to pull your energy away from you, because you're like, whoa, that's the Lamborghini wasn't part of my wealth preservation model right now. So I'm not gonna, and I think that that's also important to consider, is the fact that maybe you don't want that which you think that you want. You've just been marketed extremely well for an extremely long period of time. And what you're doing right now is you're transferring the energy that was given to you in the form of dollars because somebody else sold you a pipe dream. You are transferring that energy that you've accumulated to live a life of freedom to somebody else that has a different goal and different ambition, and you just became the customer.
Right. And you have to shake yourself free of it. When I began to study millionaires, the most popular book was a book called The Millionaire Next Door. And The Millionaire Next Door was written by two people, both of whom I knew in the course of our business, who studied the people in the insurance industry and studied wealthy people for the insurance industry, because those were the ones who would buy the biggest policies and so on. So that was who the book was for. And they talked about the habits of self-made millionaires. And one that I still remember after this is decades was that self-made millionaires don't buy new cars. Why? It's because when you buy a new car, when you drive it off the lot, it loses 20% or more of its value. And you just pay, that's for depreciation. So self-made millionaires buy used cars. They buy a car that's been leased, that's on 2 years old, and the dealers take it in and they completely refurbish it. So it's like a brand new car, only it's 20 to 30% less. And then they drive the car until it falls apart. Instead of trading it in every couple of years, they'd trade it in every 10 years or 15 years. And why? Is they then take the money that they would spend on a new car, they invest the money. And it grows and it compounds in interest. So you can almost save yourself a fortune over the course of your lifetime if you never buy a new car. And when you do buy a car, drive it until it falls apart and invest the money.
It's interesting also because you never know as an entrepreneur. You talk about this idea of when opportunity comes. And I think that that's something interesting with entrepreneurs, is the ability to capture opportunity. And I would say I'm one of those fast money individuals in the sense of how my career turned out. Like, I invested in crypto and many years ago, and that just worked. And I sold things online when the internet was exciting and easy. So it went well. And I understand maybe it's an anomaly, and that's completely okay. But what I've come to really understand in this idea of investing that you talk about is most people don't invest to preserve wealth. They invest to make a quick flip and then spend those earnings. So I think having that long-term perspective is key. How do you develop a long-term mindset when there's so many shiny objects throughout your career, where you could have just been like, well, let me go get this, let me go get that, let me go get my 9th house, my 10th house? And how do you maintain sobriety through success?
Well, everything is planning in advance. It's making the plan, because if you don't, then you'll end up reacting to a shiny object opportunity. So make a plan in advance that you are not going to do these things. and that you are going to do these specific things. So one of the things that I teach is that there's a very simple way to violate what is called Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law, the definition, is that expenses rise to meet income. No matter how much you make, you spend the same amount or more. And so the key to financial success, I say, is to break Parkinson's law, is discipline yourself to spend less than you earn. Discipline yourself to spend less than your increases. And the formula that I recommend is 50-50. So for every extra dollar that you earn, which you will do over time, save 50%, and you can spend the other 50% on lifestyle. But make a habit, and call it the wedge. You drive a wedge between your rising income and your rising lifestyle, and that 50% is always saved.
And you have to increase that gap.
Yes.
And as the gap increases, you decrease your risk of going bust. So your goal is to increase the buffer between fixed income and fixed expenditure, and then your variable expenditure needs to be gauged in a way whereby it doesn't cross over your fixed income, whereby now you're in the red. And I think entrepreneurs do that when you talked about the model of sometimes making money and sometimes not.
Well, if a person started off saving half of every increase that they earn, and they continue to upgrade their skills and get paid more and get more results and so on, then just that half over time would make them financially independent with the miracle of compounding. If you started at an early age, your first job at 21, for example, saving half of your increase. The interesting thing is there's no sacrifice to saving half your increase, because you're promising to save money that you don't have.
Yes.
And so when you finally do have it, you save half of it.
As if you didn't have it.
Yeah, and some people will save 100% of what they earn. I have a good friend who became wealthy by his 50s, and what he did is he calculated his rent, all his expenses, when he was 25, and he and his wife agreed they would not spend more than this, no matter how much more money they made, and he was very successful. So they didn't. They just basically locked in a low cost of living and saved everything else, and then let it compound. And it was quite miraculous. With virtually no other talents than his one skill, he was able to become financially independent by his early 50s. Had a bank full of money and no bills, no debts, no anything else.
The true freedom that we all start, many times we neglect by purchasing things or getting lazy, and then we end up being in the situation where we started, or even worse, which is, hey, I want to become free, which is the entire purpose of entrepreneurship. Moving on from this idea of money and still talking about preservation of wealth, and we talk about wealth as abundance, I want to talk about, how do you preserve top tier talent in your company? How do you preserve employees that become superstars and they get enticed, they get different offers? How do you, through bad times, maintain and preserve your team in order to continue flourishing?
Well, in my talk on the expediency factor, I say that human beings have 7 immutable characteristics. The first is they're lazy. The second is they're selfish. And the third is that they're greedy. And then there's 4 more. And you cannot ask a person to continue to work at a job if somebody else will pay them more. So the only way that you can keep them is by making sure that what they're getting from you is equal to or more than they could get anywhere else. And it's amazing how many employers, bosses say, well, that shouldn't be a motivation. They should do their job because of the satisfaction or joy. I say, no. Satisfaction, joy is okay, but the money comes first. So it's very simple. What you do is you match anything that they can get anywhere else. Now, here's something else, is that I've done studies on this, is that somebody comes to you and they say they're going to go to another job. They offered them $100 a month or $500 a month more. So you have a question. Do you curse them and get angry with them or anything else? No, what you say is, how much would it cost me to hire another person and train them with the specialized knowledge that this person has? For example, I had a secretary working for me. She never threatened to leave, but I noticed that she knew by voice all of our major customers. And when they would call up and say hello, she would respond, "Hello, Tom. Hello, Susan." I mean, she knew the names immediately. She knew their financial situation. She knew that their problems and she knew what they were calling for and what they needed and so on. Well, that knowledge was priceless. What would it take to hire somebody and give them all of that knowledge that turns into business and sales and profitability? So very often it's cheap to pay a person more to keep them because of their knowledge base. They're not just a person that does a function. They're a person who has a lot of experience with your business, your customers, your problems, your difficulties, your all the things. And so with my staff, I would go to them when I realized sometimes they would talk about how they could get a better job. And I remember I had an accountant named Helen. She was an older woman. And I would go to Helen about every 3 to 6 months. I say, "Helen, I would like to give you an increase. Would that be all right?" And she would always smile, a big smile. She said, "Yes, that would be okay." I said, "Well, you're doing a great job and you deserve more money, and I'm going to give you more money." And so she followed this with everybody, never had to ask for an increase, because I would go to them if I felt they were doing a good job, and I would give them sporadic increase, but it was voluntary, and they never left. And they never took all that database of knowledge that they had that would take you just a year to train somebody else in. So that's something to think about, is if you want to keep people, you have to make sure that they are earning at least as much as they could get somewhere else. And don't expect them to act against themselves by staying with you for a lower pay than they could earn somewhere else, because their life is important too. How much of their life do they want to give up for a lower paycheck if they could get a higher paycheck? And it's not fair for you to ask them, and it's just like it wouldn't be fair for them to ask you. So that's how I always handle it. And sometimes they come and they ask for more money, and you say, "Well, I can't match it because they're not doing that good a job anyway. So if they're threatening to leave, let them go." "Well, I'd sure hate to see you go, but don't let the door hit you on the way out."
There's many times, Brian, where, in entrepreneurship, business gets rough. The war is hitting you, the walls are closing in, business isn't kicking, it's not working.
Right.
How do you preserve employee morale? How do you manage your team through uncertainty and through situations where they may be doubting your leadership?
Well, every company, into every life a little rain must fall. Every company goes through fluctuations where they just cannot keep the entire staff on staff. There's always times, because of the COVID or something else, where the cash flow drops dramatically and may drop for a long time. In that case, your job as the leader is to bite the bullet and be as fair as you possibly can. But you need to let people go. You cannot build a business on losses. And if you lose, or you say, "Well, I'm going to hold them on for 6 months," what if the recession lasts 2 years in your business? So what you do after 2 or 3 months, if you realize this is a long-term recessionary period, then you sit down with people and you say, I'm sorry, but it's really out of my hands. It's the economy. And you give them letters of recommendation, and you thank them, and you tell them you'll call them as soon as things turn around, and if they're available, you'll hire them back. I mean, you do all the kind things, but stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding. That's your job as the company owner or the senior executive, is stop the bleeding before the patient dies. And it's how many people in fits of compassion end up draining the company's finances, and now the company has no money and no credit, and they can't survive. So therefore, you have to be, unfortunately, firm. I won't say hard, but you have to be firm. Number one job is to preserve and protect the company. Number one. If you don't do that, nothing else that you do. And the people that you kept on will be the ones who will turn against you once you finally tell them they have to go because you don't have any more money. They want to be your friend. They want to love you. They want to love the company, but people are lazy, greedy, and selfish. And they think about themselves first, last, and always. And they think about themselves and their family first, last, and always. So if you can't offer them something that is equal to or better than they could get in the market, and you have a shortfall of cash because of the economy, you have to let them go.
Yes.
This is the mark of the leader. The leader has to make hard decisions.
In the process of making hard decisions, you as an entrepreneur, you've been able to manage a successful marriage. You have a huge family. Your wife is great. She's absolutely amazing. And I want to talk about this concept of preserving relationships.
Yes.
As this idea of wealth, relationships is such a core, integral part to living a wealthy life. When I walk in here and I see the family photos and I see the smiles and I see you guys in different countries together, and I evaluate simultaneously the fact that you're a multimillionaire business entrepreneur that's run companies pre-internet when it was actually extremely difficult, and still managed to preserve a marriage, a good marriage. What are the secrets there? And what are the conversations that you have with your spouse as an entrepreneur saying, hey, like I have to get into the trenches. I have to go to battle, and establishing that communication, that clear relationship ahead of time so that you can actually preserve the relationship long term?
Well, it's a great question. It's really unfair for me because when Barbara and I got together back in 1977, I realized that she was the woman for me, and she realized that I was the man for her. And from that day to this, we've never had an argument. I've told her that she is number one in my life, she and the children. And I tell her that all the time, probably every day. And then I demonstrated that by the way I've organized my life and finances and everything else, is that she takes precedence over everything and anything. And that's 100%. The relationship has never been 99%. So we're very blessed. And I make sure that she and they are well provided for. I'm what the mafia call a good earner.
What is the conversation as you are building your business many years ago with your wife when you have to travel, when you have to be away for several weeks, when you have to close the office door and be like, don't talk to me, I have to deal with the situation, not right now, we can't cuddle. You know what I'm talking about?
It's never been a problem. When we had one child and then two children, then three, I was often gone for 2 weeks at a time because I would speak during the week and then on the weekends and then continue speaking. And one day she came to me and she said, I don't want you speaking on the weekends anymore. Well, coming from a poor background, weekend speaking was paid well. And so I had this, well, I have to because I have to. She said, I don't want you speaking on the weekends anymore. You need to be home with me and the children. And I sometimes joke, I went into my office and did the male sulk for a while. And then I realized she was right, is that she and the children were more important than more work. So I came out and I told her, I said, you're right. From this moment onward, I'll tell Victor, who might book her, I won't speak on the weekends anymore. And you know what happened? Is every single client I had moved their convention around so that I was speaking on either Friday or Monday. So I never lost any business at all. I was afraid I was going to lose all this business. And never lost any business at all. And when I travel, I'm very seldom gone for more than 2 weeks. And that's only when I go to Europe or Asia, because it's such a long trip. And it works out really well. And when I'm here, I spend 100% of my time with my wife and children. When they were young, we would go out for dinner. We'd do all kinds of things every single day. I never played golf. I never went fishing. I never had other vacations. 100% of my time was spent with Barbara and the kids. And they knew that. They knew that they were more important to me than anything else in the world, and that Daddy has to work to provide for our lifestyle. And so it's been good. It's been really good. We've never had any friction or stress.
Did you sit down and have that conversation in a candid way where expectations were clear? Do you remember any sort of like, hey, let's sit down, I want to kind of level with you?
Well, it was not necessary, because I reaffirm it every day.
Yes.
Every day I talk about it and tell them how important they are. And David and I would go to the movies every Saturday, and Barbara and I would go out for dinner, and the other kids. It was demonstrated, and I'm very vocal, just like you are. So I tell them, so they know. There's no doubt in their minds. And it's interesting. About a month ago, I asked them, each of my kids separately. I said, "Is there anything that I said or not said to you when you were growing up that bothers you or still bothers you?" Because I'd heard of many children whose parents had, especially their father, had said something,
hurt them in some way, shape, or form,
and they were still hurt by it.
Yeah.
And each of my 4 children reacted like I had said something
like a weird question, like, why are you asking me that?
No, they said absolutely not. Never. You never said it. I mean, they were insulted.
They were defending you.
They were defending me. And I said, that's great, because I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah.
I wanted to be sure I wasn't living in cloud cuckoo land. And so I've been very thoughtful about the quality of my relationship with my wife and my children, and they know it. They know that they always taken precedence over anything else.
And I think that's a testament to you. I think that's a testament to why I find admiration, why we're kindred in many ways, and how we perceive the world and how we continue moving through reality. And I think it's important for me to be able to sit down with people like you so that the upcoming entrepreneurs, the next generation, can realize what matters. Closing the Create, Multiply, and Preserve series, I kind of want to give you the next 5 minutes to just share some life advice. And as a culmination of all these years of business experience and business acumen and growth, what is the single greatest data set? Or
well, it's interesting because you trigger all kinds of answers when you ask this question. The answer that came to my mind was, how does a child spell the word love? And the answer is T-I-M-E. And I learned that a long time ago. And I would say it's the same thing for your wife. How do they spell love? It's time. And it's time alone with them. So I have always spent my whole life creating time with each of my children and time with Barbara. And they know that if I'm not spending time with them, then I'm working. And if I'm not working, I'm with them. It's black and white. There's no alternatives on the inside. So they are very confident. They know in their hearts that they're the most important people in my world. And there's never been a deviation from that in all their lives. But that was not by accident. I was crystal clear about that from the time that we got married and had our first child. Barbara would buy books and newsletters on child raising, and I would read them as well. And we went through about 30 books on how to raise happy, healthy, self-confident children. And then I wrote a book called How to Raise Happy, Healthy, Self-Confident Children, and produced an audio program that was sold by Nightingale Conant. And many people have said that that program has just transformed their family life. Just so many things in there that they hadn't thought about. And if you're going to be a parent, your goal is to raise happy, healthy, self-confident children. And that's what we've done. And it's set it as a goal. And then don't expect you're just going to do it by automatic rote. You're going to have to learn how. I mean, parents who have children for the first time don't know anything about having children. So you read and study, and if it's important to you, you can tell because you'll put in the hours necessary. Go to the seminars and the workshops and find out what are the things that you can do. And wonderfully enough, once you decide to get onto a track, like becoming a self-made millionaire or raising happy, healthy, self-confident children, there is so much wonderful information available, so much wonderful information. And you read it and practice it, and you see like almost like a Walt Disney film where the flowers bloom, while the children just bloom. And I'd like to think that Barbara blooms as well.
I was sitting with a real estate tycoon in Singapore many months ago, and we were talking. We sat down and had a conversation, and we were talking about this idea of where people allocate their time. And, you know, he'd made hundreds of millions of dollars selling commercial real estate. And he was like, and I asked him, well, what's next for you, like in business? And he's like, looked at me and said, you know, Luke, I spent the last 20,000 hours becoming a good businessman. I'm going to spend the next 20,000 hours learning how to become a good husband and a good dad, which boggled my mind because, once again, it's this idea of fullness and completion, and you have to become good at many things. And this idea of becoming a jack of all trades is, as they often say, jack of all trades, master of none. But I don't find that to be true, Brian. I find it to be jack of all trades, master of life. The person that can dominate multiple facets of life and really develop a full, well-lived life. Wrapping up, last question for you, for the audience, for the people listening. What is your last piece of advice? What is your last data set for the entire series?
Well, one of the best answers is to live as though every day was your last, which is very, very difficult to do. But develop clarity about what you want to do in the future. Organize your goals and priorities so that you're working on those things that are the most important to you. And remember that the most important part of your life is your relationships. And that takes precedence over everything else. Because what is it? Once they said, nobody ever said on their deathbed, I wish I'd spend more time at the office. So imagine you're on your deathbed, what would you wish that you had spent more time doing? And I mentioned earlier that my philosophy is no regrets. No regrets. So I have no regrets because everything that I recommend in every area, I practice myself. And I practice it like breathing in and breathing out. And it really works. I see myself as a truly happy person. I really am happy. I don't have any negative emotions because of the things we talked about. And I don't have any regrets because I just learn from them and let them go. And I'm here with you and with you guys, which has made this a wonderful experience today. So I thank you very much.
Mr. Brian Tracy, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to sitting and sharing many more conversations in the future.
So do I.
Thank you, my friend.